fantasy football.
Every year I set this league up and I never win.
All right, pick the draft order and get things going.
Make the call.
Don't talk to me like I'm an idiot.
This is the best day of my life!
What is up, party people? We've been watching football since 8:30 this morning, or at least I have. I can't speak for Sasha over there. Sasha, have you been watching this game at all?
I saw the play-by-play.
The
Not live.
play-by-play.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Looks
Well,
ugly.
I always react to live on this show whenever we have an 8:30 start, and Trevor Lawrence just threw a pick.
Oh,
This game's locked up.
wow.
Russell
Hey.
Wilson can only win football games in London. That's where they should play. You know what? Maybe he should do high knees on airplanes everywhere they go. Maybe
No.
that is the trick. I can't tell if he is, just trolling us now, or if that's just actually his personality.
I mean, I think it's probably just his personality. He's out there, maybe is the word I'm looking for.
This year, at least.
Different.
You know what? I think it rings true when you are at Mile High. He came from Seattle, and now he's in Denver. Like, I bet he really is Mile High all the time.
Again, please have children soon. So that dad jokes, you have at least have an excuse at that point.
Yes, a little bit. Well, so if we look at the storylines moving forward, because if you did not start anybody in this matchup, which the only relevant fantasy starters would have been Travis Etienne, Christian Kirk. You could have finagled Evan Engram in there. And then, of course, you have Jerry Jeudy that scored a touchdown. Cortland Sutton would have been a good play. I don't know. I didn't look at the stat lines. I don't really know how well Sutton has played so far. He did have a drop late in this game, which was atrocious.
Yeah.
But Russell Wilson also didn't look good in this game either, so I'm sure you sat him. Nobody was starting Trevor Lawrence this week, so not a whole lot of implications when it came to this football game, but there's plenty of other things to talk about as we dive into the Week 8 storylines. We have two battles of the states this week in Week 8. You have the Battle of Pennsylvania, and you have the Battle of Ohio. That battle coming on Monday night. Also, how will the Packers respond, the rest of the team, I should say, to Aaron Rodgers commenting and calling them out on not being able to really play football, for lack of a better term? It's the Sam Ellinger show in Indianapolis. No more Matt Ryan. He takes a back seat to the Texas rookie. The NFC North is highly one-sided right now with how well the Vikings are playing. I don't think enough people are talking about how much they're actually doing.
Yeah, that's a really, I mean, like at all. I don't feel like I've heard anything whatsoever.
And they're 5-1.
Anywhere. I know.
5-1. They're one of the best teams in football. And I think people are latching onto the why is Tom Brady and the Buccaneers, why are they so bad? Why are Aaron Rodgers and the Packers so bad? Opposed to saying like, hey, Philly is the only undefeated team in football. The Vikings are 5-1. You look at some of these other teams. How about the spread, the new spread of teams that are making playoff runs? The Giants are one of the best teams in football. The Jets are one of the best teams in football. Let's talk about that. I want to talk more about that than Tom Brady not being able to complete a pass anymore, or Aaron Rodgers and his completion numbers dropping after his MVP season. That's what I want to hear.
Yeah, 1,000%. I think that it's super well, I understand why it is that way, just because it's, these elite quarterbacks. That's great. But like the real storyline to me, like you just said, is the teams that are doing really well, that it's like, what? The Jets? Excuse me?
Well,
what is happening?
It's amazing that we are witnessing some of the worst starts for Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, LeBron James, some of the biggest great names in sports. We're witnessing that, and I get that. That's a storyline to talk about. But what's the bigger story? What are we looking at that is monumental opposed to this? Like, yeah, their dip is like, wow, that's crazy. But they're also old. Right?
Yes.
When you get old, you slow down.
Yep.
So it's predicted for something like this to happen. It's not predicted to see, or predictable, I should say, to see the Giants and the Jets be good this year.
Oh, yes, exactly. Or well, I guess Philadelphia isn't as surprising, but I certainly think that the Jets are. I do care, about Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers and blah, blah, blah. But eventually their time is going to come to an end in the NFL. So I feel like we should be talking more about the younger rising stars that are a little bit more unexpected.
Couldn't agree more. And that leads me into the quarterback rankings for this week, because the two names on my list are two names that, well, one is making a big name for himself this year, and the other one is the most unexpected riser out of all things. The first one on my list,
that we might have
you have an inkling about who I'm going to talk about.
Yeah.
The best on my list, Tua, for the second straight week. He gets such an easy matchup with the Lions. They just give up the most points in every football game, which in turn leads to good fantasy production. Now, Tua had a good return game. It wasn't like an outstanding game, but he had a good game for somebody coming back from an injury, let alone a concussion injury. Detroit has given up 20.8 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. That's the fourth highest in the NFL. They live and die by throwing the football to Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. So that game plan will continue. And it seems like that's just Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill are the engine that make this offense go. So when you look at all of these things and how many yards and touchdowns that the Lions give up this year, they give up 170 to receivers. This is an easy week for Tua to kind of solidify himself back in the top 10 fantasy quarterback conversation.
Yeah. I have a super obvious one, so I'm going to go with the not as obvious one first. And I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, but Derek Carr. Carr's finished as a top 12 fantasy quarterback in the last 3 of 5. And that's partly because he's got some of the best wide receivers in the NFL right now. And the O-line has improved since the beginning of the season. And just a real quick fun fact, all 9 of Carr's touchdowns this season have come when he's not under pressure. And I don't think that he'll really see a ton of that this week.
Well, playing the Saints, it's a good point. I like Derek Carr as well. I think that's a good play. The secondary for the Saints is completely rattled. No Marshawn Lattimore still. You find yourself in a good position. However, monitor as we go up into kickoff. How's the illness with Devontae Adams? How's he feeling coming in? What's the injury status of Darren Waller? We're going to be looking at more stuff like that as the show continues. We'll get to some of your start-sit questions as well. Send those into Hurrdat Sports or send them into us on Twitter. You can find us at Hurrdat Sports there too. We'll look at the DMs. We'll see what you got, and we'll get into some of those start-sit questions as well. But going back on my point, we'll continue to monitor all of the injuries as we move forward, because frankly, this is kind of the week of replacements, right? You have Deebo Samuel that's out. You have Chuba Hubbard that's out. Michael Thomas isn't playing. Jarvis Landry isn't playing. I talked about the 2 questionables in that same matchup. You don't have James Conner. You don't have Zeke this week. You don't have Cam Akers because the Rams have given up on him. Alan Lazard isn't playing this week. Jamar Chase is out this week. David Njoku's out this week. I had to swap out my kicker this morning because Chris Boswell's out this week. This is just a complete week of replacements. So that's how we're kind of navigating into week 8. Another guy I like, and this is who I was getting to, Sasha, our New York Giants friend, Daniel Jones this week.
Yeah.
So before the season, the lease was up on Daniel Jones. Fans were ready to trade him in to get the new model, right? You have a car for 2 years. You're like, let's just get the new thing because, I have a lease for a reason. Please welcome fantasy quarterback, top 10 fantasy quarterback, I should say, Daniel Jones to the conversation. 29 fantasy points last week, helped by that 100-plus yard rushing performance and that touchdown as well. It also helps that, defenders are solely focused on Saquon Barkley, that they end up forgetting that Daniel Jones can also do things with his feet, or maybe just teams and defenders are reminded about Daniel Jones tripping over himself last year on a walk-in touchdown. So that could be the case too. But he brings high upside in this favorable matchup against the Seahawks, because Seattle is also a team like the Lions that give up a ton of points. Seattle is top 10 in fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks this year, and in this month, I should say. So Daniel Jones, based on what I saw last week, he'll continue to eat this time around.
Yeah, I agree with you there, which is actually very funny because the person that I don't like this week is Geno Smith.
I'm starting him in a league.
Right.
So
Smith probably isn't going to light it up against the Giants pass defense when Kenneth Walker can run all over them. And again, like you had mentioned, there's likely no DK Metcalf. So missing Metcalf for the last 3 quarters last week against the Chargers, Smith completed 88.2% of his throws for almost 8 yards per attempt. And that's great, but he attempted only 17 passes and only threw 1 touchdown with Metcalf out.
So DK is still questionable going into this matchup. He had that knee injury that kind of sparked up out of nowhere last week. Keep an eye on him. So far, so good, I guess, unless something happens in warmups. But Schefter came out with something today saying that he will play. But how much will he play?
Right.
Is kind of the thing. Are you going to see more of Marquise Goodwin if Metcalf is still bothered by that knee injury? Yes, I do believe the Seahawks need him in this matchup in order to win this matchup, but we'll just see what his usage is like throughout the game. Just be aware that knee injury may linger.
Bothering, yeah,
and it could continue. Now, we just tossed out names, and it's funny because the names that we tossed out really are more streaming options than they are as locked-in starters.
But like you said, it's a week of replacements.
It is, but it also helps that there's no Tom Brady to worry about on Sunday this week.
Right.
But, people that drafted Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, who we just saw win this football game, but he only had 1 passing touchdown.
Right.
The underwhelming seasons from some of these guys lead us to start Tua, Daniel Jones, etc., Derek Carr, all the way down the list of people. Because that leads me into my hate, and that's Aaron Rodgers this week against the Bills.
I almost put him on my list.
Well, it's tough to blame everything on the former MVP. It really is. His guys can't catch the football.
Right. I can't imagine how frustrating that is.
I'm sure it's overly frustrating. But it also seems he's entering the well past his prime stage in his career. All his numbers are down. You look at his numbers from last year to this year, his completion percentage has dropped 3 percentage points. And deep balls haven't even eclipsed 25% of the time. So when you lose Devontae Adams, I get it. Like, your numbers are going to be down because you don't have the best receiver in football anymore. But that doesn't mean that you're throwing the ball on the money to some of your rookies now. A lot of times you are. We've seen Christian Watson drop balls that he shouldn't drop. Romeo Doubs, same way. But you get the Bills defense this week and everything goes out the window. You can look at everything, numbers wise with Aaron Rodgers, and you're thinking like, well, he's still Aaron Rodgers. Like his numbers could go up, they could go down depending on if people catch the ball in Green Bay. But when you face the Bills defense, push him out, find another option, go a different direction. He's a double-digit underdog for the first time in his career. The Bills give up the 3rd fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks, and Aaron Rodgers, Sasha, 32 quarterbacks in the league. Guess where Aaron Rodgers is on the list of fantasy points per game for quarterbacks?
Ooh, it's got to be 30th.
Close, 23.
Yeah, I was like, it can't be good.
He's not even in the top 15.
Yeah.
We're talking about the former NFL MVP here.
Yep.
Go away from him. I don't like him this week. Most people probably could make that assumption on their own, but don't go Aaron Rodgers' way. Find somebody new.
Figure it out. Should we do running backs?
Go for it.
I really like Raheem Mostert this week. He's finished top 15 fantasy running backs in 2 of his last 3 games. Dolphins have a really good matchup. You mentioned this earlier. For running backs this week, the Lions have allowed the 2nd most fantasy points to running backs per game. And Mostert has been the unquestionable top running back in Miami over the past month. So including playing a majority of the 3rd downs and in 2-minute drills, despite being, a traditional 2-down running back. But I really like him this week.
Yeah, I do too. And I also like names that aren't your usual starters. Because one that's on my list, the top of my list this week, is Tony Pollard.
Yeah.
So Tony Pollard has already played 63% of the snaps. That goes back to last week. The only thing he's really missing on his stat line right now are touchdowns. And with Zeke doubtful, which we all know doubtful leads to not playing, with Zeke doubtful, it's time that he can finally dip into both categories. And that makes him even bigger for fantasy production. It sets him up for a bigger fantasy productive day. Not only is Pollard looking more explosive than ever, And he has. He all season long, he's looked like the better running back opposed to Zeke. But he also gets the Bears defense. And the Bears, they allow roughly 25 fantasy points per game to running backs. That's a lot of points.
Yeah.
According to NFL.com, the Bears especially struggle on outside runs, which happen to be Pollard's strength. Right? This season, Pollard has 39 outside runs for 224 yards and a touchdown. That's good for 5.7 yards per carry. Fire up Tony Pollard this week. You just can't find a better slam dunk home run play.
Yeah, I really like that. I really like Derrick Henry this week. The Titans are at Houston.
He gets in the end zone.
Yes. That's a very good point. He's had at least 100 rushing yards in each of the last 3 games that he's played, and the Titans have a really good matchup against Houston this week. Their defense is allowing almost 165 rushing yards per game. It's a lot.
Talk about the former Titan as well, D'Onta Foreman. Get him ready to be placed, however you want to say it, into your starting lineup. Because Chuba Hubbard is not playing. Remember on our Week 8 waiver wire show, Sasha, I said, I don't think it's Chuba Hubbard. I think it's D'Onta Foreman. I like D'Onta Foreman more, and I hope the people followed. I hope the people listened. Because you don't have to worry about a timeshare.
Yeah.
Chuba Hubbard is not playing. In the past month, the Falcons have allowed 31 fantasy points per game to running backs. That's the 3rd most in that span. He's on the rise. D'Onta Foreman is on the rise. From last year to this, Foreman was the better back out of the 2, and I'd expect another 145-yard performance from him this week. This is just such an easy matchup for D'Onta Foreman. You look at that team, too, in Carolina, they need to run the football to be successful. There's nothing more that they can do. DJ Moore is relying on a backup, 3rd-string quarterback, however you want to put it. And PJ's been good. I don't want to knock PJ, but D'Onta Foreman's going to need to be better in order to compete against the top team in the NFC South right now, the Atlanta Falcons. Can you believe that?
No. What's going on? Stupid, lovely game.
Oh, man. I love football.
I do not like Nick Chubb this week. I know that he's had – hold on a second.
Whoa.
Listen, Linda. Okay, yes, he's had 8 touchdowns this season, but this week the Browns are playing the Bengals like we talked about at the top of the show, and they've given up a league low 82 rushing yards a game to running backs. I just don't see him having a ton of points for your fantasy football team this week.
Sasha.
No.
Come on.
Sometimes they say things that for shock value, but I really believe this one.
Value. I'm all for shock value.
But a lot of the times, though, on this very little podcast we have going on here, the ones that have been shocking have come back, and I'll be texting you later on Sunday and be like, "What'd I say? What did I say?"
I don't really know about that. You got lucky with Damian Harris.
I didn't, and I don't want to say that somebody's going to get injured because I didn't see that happening.
I don't need this juju. If you want to talk about juju, wait till we get to wide receivers. Nick Chubb, 3 touchdowns in week 2. He followed that up with 4 touchdowns over the next 3 weeks and another touchdown last week. Stop it, Sasha. Nick Chubb is going off again.
Okay.
I don't care what anybody has to say. It's going to be a scary sight on Halloween when you see Nick Chubb in the end zone 4 times.
Okay.
How awesome would that be? That'd be sick if you got in 4 times. I'd win fantasy this week. Let's go.
Oh, yeah. We are playing each other this week.
Are we?
Yes.
You're kidding.
I'm not.
Oh, my goodness. I don't even have Nick Chubb in this league. So that doesn't bother me all too much, but I have him in other leagues. You said Derrick Henry, though. That's who I have. I also think Christian McCaffrey is going to have a much bigger week than he did last week, so expect his numbers to trend in that direction. Before I move on to some start-sit questions, I'm going to mention my hates in this matter. Michael Carter and James Robinson, I am pushing those 2 aside this week because my biggest concern is the offensive coordinator for that team, the New York Jets, stated that they're going to ride the hot hand. And whenever you hear something like that, I'm not all in for putting somebody in my flex that has good flex appeal that, may take a back seat to somebody just because they started on the field and they weren't overly productive early on in the game. And the other guy was, and they're like, nope, we're just going to stick with him. So whoever got 2 carries for 4 yards opposed to 3 carries and 15 yards, I'm going to stick with James Robinson over Michael Carter or vice versa. I'm not going to go down that road. And I'm going to wait on these two guys to really see what happens next. Because by snagging James Robinson, the Jets are really telling their team and their fan base, like, hey, we're going all in this year. We're really good. We're trying to make a playoff run. We got James Robinson for more depth in our backfield. That's great. But for fantasy managers, it's not. Avoid this week. Pay attention to it. This backfield is like solving puzzles in an escape room. It's going to take some time to figure out
that analogy.
who's going to play.
Yeah.
Let's look at start sit. A couple of questions here coming in. And if you want to send them into our YouTube Live, feel free. We have Cam on the board. He'll be willing to share some of those questions, unless he doesn't like you. That could be a Cam thing. It could just be
Cam likes everybody.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Or Fred, I should say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Too bad we don't have the camera on you. All right. Number one, Pittman or Curtis Samuel?
Gut Samuel.
I'd probably say Michael Pittman. I know why Sasha trended with Samuel here because of the rookie quarterback in Indy, but Pittman's just the better receiver out of those two. I'd lean Pittman in that scenario. George Pickens or Brandon Ayuk?
Ooh, Ayuk.
I'd go Ayuk too. Just Deebo Samuel not in the lineup. Mm-hmm. It gives Brandon Ayuk a bigger day, essentially. Gabe Davis or DJ Moore? PPR.
That DJ Moore.
Man, Gabe Davis, I'd say. I'm not overly confident in that pick. The Packers are a good defense. They just haven't shown up. They have 7 first-rounders on that defense. Gabe Davis, though, is just the type of receiver that I know it's PPR. He may get like 4 catches, but one of those catches could be for 70 yards and a touchdown. I like Josh Allen throwing to Gabe Davis more than I like PJ throwing to DJ. So I'm going to stick with Gabe Davis there. Last one, and then we'll move on to wide receivers. Hey, same matchup here. Derek Carr or Andy Dalton?
Oh, God. Derek Carr.
Derek Carr, too. The Saints defense is beat up. Plus Andy
Dalton.
He likes to throw kicks.
Yes.
All right, let's move into some wide receivers that we like. Unless, Cam, you have any coming in live over there. We got these ones off of Twitter, so thanks for those sending those in. Hopefully we're helping you as we head into the 12 o'clock hour, 15 minutes till kickoff. So make sure you're listening right here to God Bless Fantasy Football. We'll tell you what moves to make. You just let us know. Wide receiver, Sasha, start us off.
I like Chris Olave this week. Last week against Arizona, Olave topped 100 yards and caught 7 of 14 in the loss. And this week, the Saints are up against the Raiders, who have allowed a ton of yardage to wide receivers so far this season. So he should get you some decent points this week, I would think. Speaking of Arizona, I like DeAndre Hopkins. Just after watching him last week on Thursday Night Football, he is the puppet master for this offense. He made one complaint. Like he was visibly heated. Yeah, I can't remember if it was on the field during play or on the sidelines. Visibly heated, and then no joke, Kyler Murray didn't throw the ball to anybody else. Yeah. If that's all he has to do, he's going to get fed.
Launch a formal complaint.
Let the big dog eat. 14 targets, 10 catches, 103 yards. He's one of 2 reliable names on that offense, and Zach Ertz took a back seat to D-Hop last week. This is the type of guy that will excel against the Vikings because the Vikings should be in the lead. We know that the Cardinals love to play from behind. They've been doing it all season long. They've also allowed the 14th most fantasy points to receivers. DeAndre Hopkins is a different animal. He's going to fly.
Yeah. I like Jalen Waddle this week too.
Yeah, good pick.
He's had at least 69 yards in the last 2 starts this season for Miami. And again, I put down the wrong information here. Anyway, Jalen Waddle, I have the Lions, and they are definitely playing at Minnesota. I must have grabbed something else and not put it in there anyway.
Wait, what?
Hold on a second.
Jalen Waddle's playing the Lions.
Well, then I have down the wrong information at the top. My bad. Anyway, this is live. The Lions are giving up 170 yards a game to wide receivers. So I think Waddle.
We'll do it live.
We'll get you. I just had Minnesota up there. I don't know why.
Minnesota.
Then I got real confused.
Yeah, it's all right.
I talked about Minnesota just right then and there. Maybe that's where your head was at.
Yeah.
You know, a long night. You know, adults celebrate Halloween on Saturday before Halloween.
Yeah.
So you know what? Give us a
Could be that
break.
part of
Give,
it.
give her a break. Give Sasha a break. Of course, that kickoff at noon. Dolphins Lions. That one at Ford Field. I think it's still Ford Field, isn't it?
I think so.
Another guy I like this week, Brandon Cooks. So there's word that Cooks is going to be traded. And whenever receivers get on the trading block, they normally use that as motivation to attract a Super Bowl contending team. And that's why I just like Brandon Cooks this week. No Nico Collins. He's the only top option out wide for the Houston Texans. Davis Mills is coming off a 300-plus yard performance. The Titans have struggled against receivers. We talk about it week after week. Tennessee has allowed 43.6 fantasy points per game to wide receivers. That's the third most in the NFL. In the past month, the number is 42.5. That's the fourth most. So fire up Brandon Cooks. I keep saying fire up, but I'm like really fired up.
Are you fired up?
And I'm firing him up this week, too, in my fantasy lineups. One more I like, because here's an honorable mention, Devontae Smith. He's coming off the bye week. People are kind of sleeping on Devontae Smith. You know, A.J. Brown, big presence there in Philadelphia. But this is a horrible matchup for Steelers in the secondary, He scored over 15 fantasy points in 4 of his previous 5. He's taken in 11 targets in 2 of the last 4. He's one of the biggest downfield threats in football, and the Steelers have allowed the second most fantasy points per game to receivers.
See, this is just working out real great today because who I don't like is Deontay Johnson this week against Darius Slade, James Bradbury outside, and Avonte Maddox on the inside. It's been a down year for Johnson anyway. His target volume is nice, sure, but he's only catching 50% of his targets, and it's for under 9 yards per catch. Plus, last week Johnson, didn't have a good week. He only had 10 targets, and it was 5 catches for 42 yards.
Yeah, Deontay Johnson is very productive when Mitchell Trubisky is the quarterback and not so much when Kenny Pickett.
Mm-hmm.
The guy that Kenny Pickett really likes, though, is Pat Freiermuth. And we saw that a lot last week. And as we move into tight ends, Pat Freiermuth is growing to be one of the best tight ends in football. He just really hasn't had a consistent quarterback to make him that. When he was drafted, of course, they still had Big Ben Roethlisberger. And with Ben in his prime, we saw how much he relied on Heath Miller in the tight end position. Pat Freiermuth reminds me a little bit of Heath Miller in a way. He's Mr. Safety Net, and he was that against Miami last week when they were down late in the game. Kenny Pickett was trying to just move the chains, and by moving the chains, instead of looking way downfield, he would just look for Pat Freiermuth. Kenny Pickett wasn't looking for Kenny Pickett, unless if he was, no wonder he threw a pick in the end of the game. Pat Freiermuth was just finding his spot in the zone. He would just sit there. He would catch a ball, get 13 yards. That's beautiful for PPR. That's beautiful for standard league production. You don't have to get into the end zone when your tight end's getting 9.8 points because he just caught 98 yards worth of passes. Exactly. This is really good for Pat Freiermuth to be in the position that he's in. He's seen at least 7 targets in 4 of the last 6 games, and the Eagles defense has allowed 45 yards per game to tight ends. Not that much, but expect Philly to be up big in this game. Kenny Pickett's going to have to be driving down the field like they have been in the past, and he may just have to throw it to him, that Mr. Safety Net I'm talking about, Pat Freiermuth.
Yeah. I've got Dallas Goedert on my list. He might have a bounce back game this week for the Eagles. We've mentioned this a few times so far in this episode, but the Steelers pass defense is giving up like 275 plus passing yards a game. That's vomit. He should get at least 50 yards, probably a touchdown.
I also like a name that Sasha's been proclaiming on this show over the last 2 weeks. Do you know who I'm going to talk about here at the tight end position?
No.
Jawan Johnson.
Yes, dude.
Johnson is coming alive.
I know. I will not give him up.
And no thanks to good QB play.
Right.
And he's really just one of the only healthy receiving options on offense beside Chris Olave, which is why he's producing as much as he is. If Michael Thomas was healthy and playing, if Jarvis Landry was healthy and playing, and Chris Olave was healthy and playing, Juwan Johnson would be a breadcrumb in this offense.
Yep.
But look at what he's done over the course of the last 2 weeks. Last week, 32 yards, 2 touchdowns. It was kind of one of those vulture games, as I described it. That was second best for fantasy numbers when it came to the tight end position last week. The week before, 6 targets, 8.1 fantasy points. A solid day for a tight end that you're streaming off the waiver wire. This is great for bye week work, right? You want to always find that tight end to stream. He's also been playing 75% of the snaps over those 2 weeks.
Yep.
The Raiders have allowed the 4th most fantasy points per game to tight ends. Keep an eye out for Johnson in the red zone because, as we know, they don't like to run the football all that much in the red zone. Alvin Kamara does not have a touchdown this year. They like to throw the ball when they get close for some odd reason. Let the grossness continue with Juwan Johnson finding his way into fantasy relevance this week.
Who do you hate? Well, I'll tell you who I hate. I don't like Tyler Higbee this week.
It's kind of hard to like Tyler Higbee. I liked him a lot because the Rams were throwing to him a lot, but Matt Stafford hasn't been fun to watch.
That's what I was just going to say. Also, the targets have gone down because the wideouts are playing better for Matt Stafford. But yeah, just not a good feeling there.
Now, somebody that I dislike this week, and it may come as a shock. This may be one of the more shocking plays, but Dawson Knox is not making his way into my lineup this week.
Wow.
So, and here's why. It may sound like, what are you talking about? Like the Packers just have not been good defensively. You talked about, 7 first rounders and, they were supposed to be a great defense, but they're not.
It's just the Bills.
The target share, right? The target share for Dawson Knox. So he makes use of what targets he gets. Last week, was it last week or the week before? Were they on a bye last week?
They were on a bye last week. Yeah.
So the week before against the Chiefs, 3 catches on 3 targets. So he makes use of what those are. And he finally got into the end zone too against the Chiefs.
Yep.
But going back all season long, he's averaging roughly 3 targets a game. Just 3. That's not very good for a tight end. You don't normally see that on a tight end on a team as good as the Bills. He caught a touchdown, yes. But in one game this year, he's seen more than 6 targets. That's it. One game.
He only has 1 touchdown too.
Yeah, that game against the Chiefs.
Right.
He's touchdown dependent. That's what you label somebody that gets 3 targets a game. But if you have 1 touchdown, you're not a guy that anybody's feeling comfortable starting.
Yeah.
And how well the Packers defend the tight end position this year? Oh man, push him off. Push him off a week.
Get out of here.
Wait and see. Now, I have a defense that I want to talk about, but let's get into some more start-sit questions as we get into the 5-minute window before kickoff. Sasha, PPR, start 2. Amon-Ra St. Brown, T. Higgins, DeAndre Swift, Brandon Ayuk, or Gabe Davis. Wow, this is a good list of players, and you only have to start 2. Who else is on your team?
No kidding. Ayuk, and then who was the first? St. Brown? Is that who you said? Yeah, those are the 2 I'd go with.
Man, if Amon Brown is as healthy as people are saying he is, he's for sure one player that you're starting. I'm actually between 2, and it's not Brandon Ayuk, oddly enough. I mean, how do you go wrong picking here? You get Amon-Ra against Miami. They need a spark. They need one of his week 2 games when he went off for 116 and 2 touchdowns. I would probably say, because it's PPR, I was going to say if it wasn't PPR, I would have said Swift, because Swift is back and healthy. And why not start 2 Lions, right? Why not? But I think I like T. Higgins. Okay. And the reason for that is Jamar Chase out for 4 to 6 weeks. Yeah. And T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd will battle for the number 1 receiver, but T. Higgins, in my opinion, is the number 1 receiver right now with Chase out. I would start those 2. Damian Pierce or Ramondre Stevenson?
Ooh. Pierce, actually.
I'd say Pierce too. Just that answer is solely based off of workload. Damian Harris had a lot of carries and butt into Stevenson's production last week. Yeah. Dawson Knox or Kyle Pitts? Oh my gosh.
Pitts.
Both of those are horrific plays. I guess Pitts, but don't be shocked.
I don't think it matters.
1 catch for 4 yards.
Pick one.
Don't be shocked. He's got the bigger ceiling, Dawson Knox as the safe floor, whatever you really want to go with there. I would choose higher ceiling week in and week out. Let me talk about defense, and then we'll get into 3 more start-sit questions, and we'll wrap this thing up. My favorite defense this week is the Indianapolis Colts. And the Colts are playing the Commanders. The Commanders have allowed 9.29 fantasy points roughly to opposing defenses. That's the 6th most in the NFL. Now, the Packers D got 9 last week, and part of that was help of a pick 6. But Taylor Heineke throws a lot of picks. He does. 15 picks on the season last year. It's a lot for a quarterback that, kind of gets shuffled around in that offense. The Colts have played well, too, the last 3 weeks defensively. They compiled 17, 8, and 9 in standard leagues. I'd expect big numbers from the Blue Horseshoes again this week. The Steelers are the defense that I am fading because there's no TJ Watt again. And when TJ Watt is not on the field, that makes this defense unstartable. They're also playing the Eagles. I'd never recommend a defense against the Eagles, but the Steelers have scored 5 fantasy points or less in every game since week 2. Puke
emoji.
No TJ Watt?
Yeah.
No, thank you. No, thank you. 2 minutes to go. Start sit questions. Send them in quickly. Let's make your lineup the best it can be. Sit 1, CMC, Kamara, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard. Half-point PPR.
Pollard.
Honestly, I'm going to sit Kamara.
Oh.
Josh Jacobs has been feasting.
All
and
right.
Tony Pollard, I love his matchup this week, and I'm starting CMC. Oddly enough, I'm going to sit Kamara. Need 1, half-point PPR. Donovan Peoples-Jones, Goodwin, Paris Campbell, or Damian Pierce?
Damian Pierce.
Peoples-Jones. Let's go Monday Night Football here. I want a weapon on Monday
I
Night
almost
Football.
said that, but that's what
1 point PPR, Lockett or Boyd?
Lockett.
I'm going to go Boyd. Let's stick with Monday Night Football here. We're trending in that direction.
All right.
Monday Night Football, really fun matchup. It's the Battle of the Ohios. There's no Jamar Chase, which opens up the room for some of those bench receivers you've been holding on to, named Tyler Boyd or somebody else in the mix. I am all about Cincinnati this week. I think they're going to have a big week. I don't really like Amari Cooper. I know we're getting pretty close to the noon window slate here. Cam, any more questions coming in on Hurrdat Sports? Thank you so much for helping us make this show one of the best it can be by sending in your start-sit questions. Hopefully, we also, in turn, helped you set your best fantasy lineup to get you over the hump. And now that we're halfway through the season, maybe into playoff contention as we go down the stretch. Happy Sunday. And remember, there are many things a man can do with his time, but none are better than this. For Sausha Durkan and Cam Broham, I'm Andrew Rogers. God bless you, and God bless fantasy football.